Dimension 20 is a treasure trove of a D&D game. It has mystery, it has comedy, it has drama, and it has some of the greatest storytelling I've ever seen. So I thought it would be a great idea to analyze what makes this game elevated from just a normal D&D game to a masterpiece. I want to see what things we can learn from both the players and the DM to hopefully make our games slightly better, at the very least. So, what we're going to do is go episode by episode, every other week, and see what lessons we can learn from the 20th Dimension. We will be starting with the first season of Dimension 20, Fantasy High. And if you haven't seen Fantasy High yet, here's a bit of a taste of what's to come.
This season marks the beginning of our adventure into the world of Fantasy High, where we ask the question that has long gone unasked. What would happen if John Hughes ran a game of a tabletop RPG? And we're gonna find out today. Swords, high school, puberty, magic, it's all coming together.
And of course, I will be doing a recap of the episode, so if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want to be spoiled, I'd recommend go watching it now and then coming back to this video. Fantasy High starts off with an introduction of each character. We kick off with
Fabian Aramis, Seacaster,
who is played by Lou Wilson. Fabian is an entitled rich jock who has only known victory and money. His introductory scene shows him fencing against his instructor Hersan while his mother drunkenly watches and cheers him on. Later, his father, Bill Seacaster, comes on in and talks about how he's going to die someday and that for Fabian's first day at the Eggfort Adventuring Academy, he should find the biggest and toughest looking guy and punch him. Great idea. Next up, we see
Kristen Applebee's,
who is played by Allie Beardsley. Kristen comes from a religious conservative suburban household whose family are all devout worshippers of Helio, the corn god. Kristen herself is chosen of the corn god, son of Sol, the sun god. But Kristen wants to go to Eggfort instead of the normal religious school because she wants to explore new things, meet new people that aren't just religious humans. Kristen has the most politics that come from her storyline, and I think it would be a fun idea to talk about that more in depth later. Next, we see
Gorgug,
played by Zach Oyama. Gorgug is an adopted half-orc sad boy, adopted by the sweetest and kindest gnomes that ever have showed up in a piece of media. Gorgug constantly breaks his bed because it's way too small for him since he's living in a gnome household and has some anger management issues. Next up, we see
Adine Abinant,
played by Siobhan Thompson. Adine is another rich kid, however, not rich in the entitled way that Fabian has, but rich in the way of any one mistake makes her parents immediately disappointed in her. We start off her scene by seeing her father reading a newspaper, reading about how the Elven Oracle got into a shipwreck and has died. That's definitely not important. Later, fighting breaks out in the breakfast table when Adine makes her sister puke, and they all just kind of gang up on Adine. She is not the perfect daughter, that's her sister. Later on, Adine continues bickering with her sister, while her sister convinces her to, when she goes to Eggfort, steal a book from the restricted section, because if you do that on your first day, you get into a magical secret society. Great. Second to last, we have
Rizga Gak,
played by Brian Murphy. He is an unlicensed investigator, and he is trying to solve the mystery of his disappearing babysitter. He gets about 4 hours of sleep, drinks mostly coffee, and made business cards to give to people with his phone number on them to make friends. As you can imagine, he gets beat up within 5 minutes of entering the school. Last but certainly not least, we have
Figurath,
played by Emily Axford. Fig is a tiefling whose parents are getting divorced because her dad is not her real dad. Her mom fucked a demon and had her, and that's really upsetting, which is probably why she's now smoking cigarettes, getting a flask full of alcohol, and generally rebelling against everything. Let's pause the recap right there and talk about our first lesson, going all in on a story. Dimension 20 makes a name for itself because it is mostly known for the amount of genre mashups it does. From Fantasy High with high school teen drama meets high fantasy, to the newest season, Never After, where horror and fairy tale commingle into a wonderful masterpiece. There's a lot that can be learned from Brennan and the rest of the players, especially in this first episode, because we see how well they make the game feel like those two genres. This episode, this game feels like a high school drama TV show. Let's focus on one of the intro scenes and show how that feels like a sitcom. In Fabian's scene, there is so many different times within it where you could just add in audience laughter or clapping or cheering, having audience reactions in there, and it would feel completely natural.
Darling, you look wonderful. Are you winning the fight? I don't.
Oh, Mama, Hersan is really giving it to me today, but don't worry, I'll best him yet.
Hersan, let my boy win. Let him win the sweet boy.
Oh, Hersan, don't you dare take it easy on me, all right? I need to be strong.
Of course, I would never take it easy on you. You are a champion. You have the gift of your father.
Yes.
You hear Aleph say, "Did someone mention the man of the house?"
It shows how both Brennan and Lou acknowledge that this is a high school sitcom type of show. They both know what kind of story this is, and both play into the story, which enhances the story overall. You should do the same thing with your games. If you are playing the average high fantasy type of game, no shame, I do it too, then you probably should have stuff that you would expect. Have a dragon fight. Have a great wizard telling you to kill an evil emperor. That's the kind of story that the players are expecting, and that's what they want. If you're going into a weird other genre, then make sure that you're not half-assing it. You should be going all in onto that genre, because if you're not, then it doesn't feel like you're going all in on the story. Another thing that Brennan does incredibly well is setting the scene. Every single character introduction starts off with their own musical piece.
Yep.
Just really feel it.
Okay. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Hell yeah.
Nice.
When you feel a little mad, it's probably because you really feel sad. Just remember your mom and dad, and then you'll start to feel real glad.
He also describes the scene in great detail in a way that would match the character. Having both that song be playing and the description of the world surrounding it be what your character would expect to see heightens the immersion. I would suggest that you and your DM work together to either make a playlist based on your character, find a song, or even make a playlist based on the entire campaign. Then, when you need to, you can play that music either to get into character before the game starts, or to enhance a scene where you do an epic battle or do an incredible feat of strength. It gives the immersion more and better feel, as well as supports the story surrounding it. Final thing that you can learn about going all in is when you're making characters. These characters do a great job of being a part of the story because they feel like they belong to the story. You have the rich entitled jock, you have the religious kid, you have the sad one, you have the nerdy one, you have the one that's getting straight A's but is really stressed out about it, and you have the incredibly goth and punk girl who's rebelling against her family. All of these are character tropes that you'd expect to see in this genre. And I know a lot of people say that that's uncreative and it's boring because it's done over and over again, but I'd argue that there's a reason why they're done over and over again. They work with the story incredibly well. I think the issue most people have with tropey characters is the false connection between trope and class in D&D. People, whenever you think of an edgy character, you think of a rogue, which is not always the case. In fact, in Fantasy High, the edgiest and saddest and most brooding characters are the barbarian and the bard. Tropes don't have to be class-based. You can have an edgy character that isn't a rogue. You can have religious characters that can be rangers or barbarians or sorcerers. You can have a trope, but not tie a character class to that. That's not a necessary thing to do. And once you realize that, there's so many different characters that you can make. Anyway, let's get back to the recap. All of the characters eventually find themselves at the Eggfort Adventuring Academy. We start off with Fabian looking for the biggest and toughest guy, seeing Gorgug, and socking him in the stomach. This leads to a fight between the two of them, where Vice Principal Goldenhorde breaks up the fight and gives them...
That's immediate detention for both of you. First day after school.
Fig uses the opportunity to sneak into a teacher's lounge, rolls a nat 1 on a stealth check, and...
Okay, immediate detention.
Riz meets the two most popular kids in the school, Penelope Everpetal and Dane Blade. They are giving out flyers for people to try to vote to have prom king and queen come back to Eggfort. This definitely isn't important. Riz tries to hand them both business cards, and Rog Barkrock, the school bully, comes up, picks him up, and dunks him into the trash can. Riz is now referred to as the Ball. Kristen finds Coach Daybreak, who is a paladin of soul and from the same church that Kristen goes to. They have a bit of a conversation, and Zane Darkshadow, a goth necromancer, comes up, slaps the Bible out of Kristen's hand, says,
What's up, cleric? How's it going?
Did you do that on purpose?
I don't know. Did God curse us to live on purpose?
Coach Daybreak picks the book up, hands it back to Kristen, and says, Get out of here, Zane Darkshadow. Great name. An assembly is called to bring in the new year with Principal Arthur Eggfort, a purple-suited wizard who is batshit crazy, comes out and explains what a hero is.
A hero is someone with the strength of heart, courage of spirit, and the might of will to go to strange lands and enact violence on things there.
Adine then steals a book called Watches and Wards from the restricted section and gets caught by Vice Principal Goldenhorde. That is going to be another...
I'm afraid I'm going to have to give you detention. So, you'll be staying late after school today. Do you understand? All right. This is not fun for me. You're clearly having a bad time. I'm second-guessing what I'm doing, even as I'm doing it, wondering if there's some medical stuff going on that I don't know about. But I'm going to do it, because I've already talked out loud, and other students can hear this.
Fabian tries out for Blood Rush, doesn't care about any of his teammates, and just shows off, where Coach Daybreak then yells at him for having no heart, sends him to the showers, and kicks him out of the team. And he gets another detention. Riz is trying to find the rogue teacher, and ends up instead finding Johnny Spells, Sam Nightingale, and Penelope Everpetal having a serious conversation outside the building. Johnny Spells is an adult who hangs out near high schoolers. That's bad. While Sam and Penelope are best friends, Sam dating the full adult. Sam and Penelope eventually leave that conversation and sneak off into the bathroom, where Riz wants to hear what's going on, so tries to convince another girl, a dwarfen girl named Ostentatia Wallace, to go into the bathroom and spy for him. Ostentatia says, sure. However, you need to get me some tea from Principal Eggfort's office. Riz obliges, breaks into the office, where he sees Vice Principal Goldenhorde. That's going to be another
Immediate detention!
Riz does get the tea and then goes and gives it to Ostentatia, however. Then we come to lunch, where Arthur Eggfort announces that now is the time for the people to get into a party. Find the heroes that you're going to be adventuring with for the remainder of your lives and your careers. The people in detention, the bad kids, as Kristen calls them, are just kind of forced into a party. And Kristen gets Coach Daybreak to give her a detention as well for bearing false witness. Definitely illegal in the school. And she gets detention and joins the rest of the players. We have now formed the party. During lunch, while they're in line talking, Rog Barkrock, who heard about her crimes, picks up her Bible and chucks it into the cream corn, because how dare she bear false witness? Finally, the party goes to detention. They talk with Counselor Gibbons and get a boring speech from him, while they hear a scream come from the cafeteria. They rush to it and find themselves staring at a bunch of corn gremlins, a giant cream corn ooze, and a possessed lunch lady Doreen cackling about how it's lunchtime. That's the end for the episode, so let's get into the next lesson. Brennan does an excellent job at moving the plot along subtly. He uses jokes to mask plot points that are important, as well as direct the players to where he wants them to go. This is shown in the introductory scenes when Bill Seacaster tells Fabian to go and beat up the person who looks the biggest, and that being Gorgug, sending them both to detention. He tells Adine to go steal a book from the restricted section, giving her detention. He pushes every single one of the players into getting detention, I guess besides Kristen, who does it herself, but I'm sure that Brennan had a way to give her detention anyways. And he does it in an expert fashion, where they hear this as jokes when really it's where he needs them to be. The same is said for his mystery plot points. He, once again, uses jokes to mask important details, such as Zane Darkshadow slapping the book out of Kristen's hands, Coach Daybreak picking it up, giving it back to her, and then it later being thrown into the cream corn. That is an incredibly important plot point, because that's the beginning of the mystery surrounding Eggfort. For your own games, I think it's a great idea to follow in Brendan's footsteps. Use jokes to hide important clues and plot points. Just recently, I had a player listening in on a boring history lecture, which used a bunch of big and intelligent sounding words, because inside of that lecture was hidden away clues as to what the artifact they were trying to find actually was. Using jokes is such a good technique, because jokes do a great job at masking clues, but they're also incredibly memorable. If you just say a throwaway line like "there's scratches on the walls," and that's supposed to be a very big clue, people aren't going to grasp onto that because it's not important. It's not tickling their brain. But if you hide clues in a joke, then people are going to remember it more. And then when you do a reveal that gives them a little bit more information, then they're going to remember that joke, connect the two, and make the mystery even easier to solve and more enjoyable to solve, because they figured something out. It's a great technique to use. Now, for Fantasy High, Brennan does a lot of plot points and a lot of jokes at the same time. There's so many different threads that he puts into motion in this very first episode, and honestly, I think too much for most of the party to understand. Now, there's a reason why he's doing that, and it's because he only has a set number of episodes and sessions that he can run this game on, so he needs to make sure that he can get through the plot and have it be exciting enough so that the show is good and also his players have a fun time. For the majority of people, we don't have a time limit on sessions, and games can last months, years even. So I'd suggest going for a more of like a 1 to 2 joke clues per every other session instead of what Brendan does of 1 to 2 per 10 minutes. Well, that's all for this week. Fantasy High Episode 1 shows us how to go all in on an episode and how to hide clues in plain sight using jokes. I think Fantasy High is an absolutely great D&D season, and if you haven't seen it all the way, I'll be coming in 2 weeks with episode 2, Clash of the Corn Cuties. So, in the meantime, you can watch that second episode for yourself, and then we can talk about it here. Anyways, have a great D&D game when you have it, and I'll see you later.